Welcome everyone to London Tech Leaders 6. It's a lovely day in London, so thanks for joining us this afternoon. Those who haven't joined us before or are new to London Tech Leaders, we're a peer-to-peer kind of platform for leadership content. So we've got a website which shares kind of blogs, articles, animated videos, but we do these quarterly events which are kind of great, panel sessions discussing technology trends, pain points we're seeing in the market, an opportunity for us to kind of network. Ideally, we're going to move back to in-person events once the kind of lockdown plans finalised, and we're lining up our next event probably around kind of September time. So we'll be sharing more details for that. The organisers behind the event do a lot of work kind of putting this together. So alongside myself, we've got Jack Moore, one of the directors of WeShape, and the legend David Crawford, who does all our kind of comparing. He's going to be running today's session. We are a social bunch, so if you are on kind of LinkedIn, Twitter or Instagram, please do follow us. Share your kind of thoughts, feedback, keep the kind of topics and suggestions going throughout the kind of session. But yeah, please do connect with us on either of these platforms. The agenda today, so it's all about the digital skills gap, kind of trends we're seeing based on kind of lockdown, around kind of remote working and kind of physical footprint and how you can use technology to drive that forward. So we're joined by David Crawford, who's the Group CTO of Naked Wines, Mohammed Brahim, who is the CTO of Profile Pensions, Matt Shootley from Ground Control, Renee Hawkins from ThoughtWorks, one of the leading kind of digital consultancies, and Rick Barker from Flutter. If you do have any questions throughout the session, there is a chat box below. So do ping across any questions you've got throughout. David, myself or Jack will try and allocate them to the right kind of panelists throughout the session. If you haven't already, we do also have a newsletter. So this is shared kind of monthly, and it includes, I guess, the latest articles from our contributing authors, video content, and also something that's we're massive advocates for is mental health tips for leadership executives. So this is from our friends at Sanctus, who do some amazing work in kind of different startups and enterprise companies' workplaces. The best way to kind of sign up for this is follow the kind of QR code or go onto our website, LondonTechLeaders.io, and register your interest. If you want to speak at one of our events, we're always open to new speakers, new contributors. If you write your own blogs on one kind of incremental platform to share and distribute your content, these are different ways to connect with us. Easiest way is to register your interest on the website or drop us a message directly, but always keen to hear from new speakers across the market. So yeah, give us a shout. Finally, our sponsors. So we wouldn't be here without our sponsors. I'm not going to dwell on it too much because I'm one of the directors of WeShape, so I don't kind of give you that full sales pitch, but simply we're a DevOps, digital, data and cloud native consultancy, do anywhere from kind of advisory solutions right through to kind of implementation and coaching. We also have another event that we're behind, which is London DevOps, which is a 8,000 plus open source community. So if you want to speak at a leadership level or a more kind of technology practitioner level, let us know and we can get you involved. One thing I did want to mention is we host kind of monthly workshops for board level executives around kind of cloud DevOps and SRE. We've got a really interesting workshop next week around cloud migration and optimization. Completely free, check it out, and hopefully see you there. And the big news is we've recently built a partnership with Slack. So Slack's our latest sponsor to join the London Tech Leaders Forum, and they're going to be a big contributor for the next year. So yeah, massive thank you to the guys at Slack who have supported this community and allowed us to kind of invest more in the content, the contributing author side. So if you do know their platform, which I think most of you do, awesome kind of communications channel, but do check them out if you haven't. If you want any details around Slack, let us know and we can make sure we introduce you to the right team. But yeah, without further ado, I'm going to pass over to David for today's event.
Great, thanks, Chris. Love a bit of Slack. Can't get enough of it. I think we all probably use it in our organizations. So really pleased to hear that we've got the partnership going with those guys now. That's really great. So for those of you who haven't attended this before, thank you to those who have. But for those of you who are new, I'm David Crawford, Group CTO of Naked Wines. I've been around the block a few times and found myself at Naked Wines, whose product I obviously love. and we're a direct-to-consumer e-commerce company across the UK, US, and Australia. The idea of me being the compere here is that I'm a reasonably experienced technologist. I'm talking to people who are technologists or involved in technology systems and services, and so we should be able to have an interesting debate where I can hopefully challenge, give my own opinion, etc., etc. And I'll keep things going merrily along and smile when there's pauses in the conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to just give themselves a brief introduction. As per normal Zoom protocol, I will go around the floor based on how they appear on my screen. So Rennie, that means you first, please.
All right, thank you, David. Hello, everyone. My name is Renee Hawkins. I'm the COO of ThoughtWorks UK. For many of you that might not know ThoughtWorks, we're a global technology consultancy, and we integrate strategy, design, engineering to drive digital innovation. We partner with large customers, and you probably have familiarity with a lot of our customers across the board, and we've probably been at the back end of many of your transactions, things like buying a train ticket on Trainline through to purchasing something at JD Sports. So we're all over the place. We focus on the custom aspect of software delivery and trying to help our clients with their tech strategy and business strategy alignment. My role focuses on end-to-end talent and operations for our business. So the digital skills gap is something that's very true and near to me. So I'm looking forward to sharing some of my views today. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rennie. Mohammed, you're up next. Oh, we got our first "you're on mute" of the day. Well done, Mohammed.
Well done to me. It's like so confusing to move from one platform to another. And the dreaded "you're on mute" that we've all heard during 2020 and has been trending. So I'm Mohammed Brahim. I'm the CTO at Profile Pensions. Profile Pensions is a fintech business dealing with the pensions industry and trying to bring a mass market product that will allow people to consolidate their pension on an advice basis. So what we try to disrupt is the traditional IFA market. We are growing strong. We have currently 1 billion of assets under management, close to 30,000 customers. It's really interesting to see in the perspective of a small startup trying to grow how 2020 created all raft of new challenges, from hiring to digital skills to how we approach product management and collaboration. So really excited to be here.
Brilliant. Great, Mohammed. Thank you. Matt.
Hello. Hi, David. Thanks for you and Jack and Chris and co for inviting me along. I'm really pleased to be here. I'm Matt Stutley. I'm the head of engineering at a company called Ground Control. And you almost certainly heard of ThoughtWorks. You almost certainly haven't heard of Ground Control, but you probably have seen our work. We are the UK's leading grounds maintenance and landscape construction organisation, and we maintain and care for a huge number of sites across the country, including sites like Tesco, Sainsbury's, sites like NHS, Severn Trent Water, Travelodge, Whitbread, Premier Inn, all kinds of businesses who have land. We care for it for them. We're a carbon neutral company who are really, really focused on caring for the environment. My role at Ground Control, I started in January, having worked at the UK Parliament for kind of 9 years before that. And my role is kind of leading quite a significant for our organisation transformation to working towards digital first for our business, which leads really, really nicely into the topics today. So I'm looking forward to talking about them.
It does indeed, Matt. It does be interesting to hear about how you're dealing with the physical challenges of such a wide network of businesses. And last but by no means least, Rick.
Hello, David. Thank you very much for the invite again. Also a lover of your products. So I'm Rick Barker. I'm the CIO for the UK and Ireland division of the Flutter Group. I look after the tech and the tech strategy for the Sky Bet, Paddy Power and Betfair brands. I've been in that role since September last year, so it's a pretty weird time to join, to take on a new role. The division itself is new. It's as a result of a merger between Paddy Power, between Flutter and the Stars Group, bringing together some pretty large organizations. So the division's new, the team I'm in's new, and I've spent the last 9 months trying to build a team remotely, get to know the people who work for me, and give them an opportunity to get to know me too. Before that, I was the CTO of Skybet for 2 years, and before that, I was a tech director there. And prior to that, I was a CTO of a digital agency, similar in style to ThoughtWorks, but significantly smaller and significantly less impressive, probably. Thanks, mate.
All right, thanks, Rick. I think we've established that ThoughtWorks wins the award for everybody knowing them and being large and impressive, right? So, excellent. Well done, Rennie. You've not done anything yet. You've achieved an award. Great. All right, so we know how this goes, guys. Got some questions. We've published them in advance this year. You can see them on the London Tech Leaders website. But we're going to go around and ask our panel what their thoughts are and their experience around some of these questions. So we're going to dive straight in. Our first question is around the digital skills gap. That's probably our biggest question for today. I think that you know, the BBC published a recent report saying that we're heading towards a catastrophic digital skills shortage. I guess some of us have been around for a while and we've heard that for a while. And there's been lots of different ways of us dealing with that over time. I think the pandemic has added a new layer onto that. And I think, you know, while some people are probably saying, well, it's allowed me to broaden my net with remote workers, you know, I don't know what it's doing in terms of our investment in our people. I'm not sure whether, you know, we're investing at the grassroots level in STEM subject education and basically our apprenticeship programs and our graduate programs, which maybe needed more of a local physical presence in an office, so you could look over somebody's shoulder and help them. They might be impacted by the pandemic. So are we facing a catastrophic event here, or is it just more of the same as it has been over the last few years? Rennie, I wanted to come to you with that. I know you had some good thoughts on this.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I think ThoughtWorks has been a fortunate business where we're a global consultancy. So we've been using tools, you know, for remote collaboration for years and years. So the transition to fully remote through the pandemic globally was fairly easy for us in some ways. Obviously, we had to lead our clients on that journey, but I think more so from a in-house perspective. We do run graduate programs, and it's one of our biggest sources of recruitment for our business is hiring through the graduate scheme. We run our own ThoughtWorks University, and that is something where we had to spend time and invest time in figuring out how do we fully make that program remote. And it's meant the investment takes longer. Instead of having folks go 5 weeks and spend in an intensive learning environment, we've had to extend that to 7 weeks so that we incorporate breaks in and people don't have Zoom fatigue and all of the things. So I think it just requires a lot of innovative thinking. I don't think that you have to physically be present to learn. Definitely not the case, but you have to be innovative with the ways in which you adapt what you currently have in your business. And I think similarly with just digital skills in general, we know there's a talent shortage. Got a good statistic from a report by Forbes, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now this is a US number, but they always still are leading. They say that for every one job seeking person, there's 3 jobs available in the US, engineers, sorry. So there are 1 million unfulfilled jobs. The reality is that you're going to have to grow your own. We were going back and talking about climate change earlier before we started the full call. You know, grow your own is a thing that you think about in your garden, but I think that businesses start to think about a little bit more about growing your own. How are you going to grow your own data skill sets? How are you going to grow your own cybersecurity skill sets? Because those are skill sets that are scarce in the marketplace, but also ones that you have to think about. So we also at ThoughtWorks have done a number of programs. We have our own data university, we have our own infrastructure academy, we have some security training, but not quite yet at the level that we need it to be. So we know it's something that we need to evolve.
All right, okay. So I think we're saying there that you know, graduate programs, apprenticeship programs, you know, growing your own, I like that phrase, is still important. Maybe needs a bit of adjustment in the approach, but it's still fundamentally important. I love that stat. That stat's a harsh one. I'm in the middle of recruiting in America at the moment, and plenty of candidates turning up. I'm really quite enthusiastic. And then we sort of got to the end of a kind of 2-week process and got to the offer point, and suddenly was just getting gazumped everywhere by people coming and saying, well, I've got 3 other offers, so can you, and it was really quite sort of shocking that we had to do that. And, you know, fast coming to the opinion of like, okay, we might need to take a different approach to some of this and maybe get a few experienced people and a few less experienced. Rick, how are you finding that?
I think I'd echo a lot of the things that Renee's just said. There's a couple of really interesting points to pick up there, particularly around how you train people in a remote world. So we had our own academy. I would have said that I didn't agree that there's a catastrophic digital skills shortage, and I think that there isn't, because barriers to entry, and this is where I really do agree with Renee, barriers to entry are really dashed down to the willingness of your organization to invest in your people. So if you can't hire for skill set, hire for mindset and train people up. So we've started, I think, broadening out the places that we look for people. We're working with a variety of different organizations, from sort of traditional recruiters through to charities that help look for roles for neurodiverse people, and then how do you bring them into your organization, and then that ripples out with, okay, now what extra training do we need for managers to cope with people who approach things differently. We run our own internal academy, though we did pause our grad scheme last year while we were trying to work out how you managed an intake. That was less about our ambition to take part in it and more about wanting to do right by the people you hire. And I don't think we would have done a good job in bringing people in then. But now I think, you know, we're getting better at this. We're getting better at being in a world where we work remotely and people are more comfortable with it. And so we had already started moving towards a world where we did kind of on-demand training with our academy. So if we had a skill shortage inside, then we would find somebody inside who was good at that, and we'd help them learn to be a teacher, and then they would run courses for other people in the organization who wanted to run it. And so that really echoed a grow your own point, because I think that works. But ultimately, I think the final point I'll make on this is that our whole industry is continually advanced by innovation. And when you see something like a skills shortage in an area, you tend to quite quickly see productization spin up to commoditize whatever that is. And you see that now in a lot of the data, insight, and analytics tools are spinning up in areas where data scientists are hard to get hold of. So there might be a shortage now, but that doesn't mean there's a shortage forever, and it doesn't mean that we're in the middle of a crisis.
So I think, yeah, it's a lot of the stuff that Renee was saying there. We've Rob Crabtree, one of our attendees, has posted, how do you manage grow your own for scarce skill sets against market pressure that will steal them in a year's time? And he's saying especially relevant for subject matter experts. Yeah, I can think it's the same for every single, you know, security guys, data engineers, all of those are very, very scarce skill sets, right? But Mohammed, have you had any experience of that? And you know, in terms of like, would you still invest in people worrying that they might be nicked in a couple of years? Well, have I got you on mute again, Mohammed? That's twice, Mohammed. 3 times and you're out. That's how it works.
It's like a yellow card, right? After it's red.
Definitely a yellow card. Yellow card.
I'm really bad at this. Sorry, man.
Don't worry.
So I've been listening actually, and it's really interesting. So especially in the perspective of a small company like us that doesn't have a name, like, you know, Renee, like ThoughtWorks is such a global brand, and it's kind of, you still can maintain the investment or, you know, or the influx. But for us, like, we don't exist, nobody knows us. So whilst we have a very cool technology approach and culture, you have to defend, you know, you have to find a way to attract people. And to do that, it's kind of, we accept, and we're perfectly comfortable that we're kind of a stepping stone. And we've seen that where we hire for the brain more than the skill, definitely. On the premise that we've tried to design our organization or the way we do work in a really compelling and easy to understand way, because people don't like getting into a small company, especially if it suffers from complexity. But what we tend to see is we would hire, so we don't have a shortage really, because we try to spot the potential of people if they have a good brain. So for example, for our data science environment, we'll try to identify people who did you know, math, and try to find, you know, a career somewhere that might be interested in research, and we lean them into solving an industry problem through technology, but not really we don't tell them we're looking for software engineer. You're going to do software engineering, but really we want your brain. Do you have a good brain? Do you like this challenge? and we let them discover through the journey if actually they like software engineering or not. What tends to happen is they do a really good job at it, but after 2 or 3 years, then they have all the toolkit to go to ThoughtWorks or IBM, but I think we're super relaxed about it. I mean, there's a quote that everybody overuses, which is it's better to train people and they leave than don't train them and they stay. And we completely comfortable with that approach. So for us, it's really hire for the brain. It's not about creating a graduate program. It's really looking at the person and trying to see, can that person add something to the organization? That's been our approach, certainly, and it's been successful.
Yeah, no, I think, Rennie, you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I agree, and I understand it. I'm enjoying the humor around the ThoughtWorks piece, and to be fair, we get poached as well, so it happens, right? It's just part of being in tech and being in a competitive talent marketplace. I mean, there's 2 things I want to touch on. One, I think for smaller businesses, because I do know that ThoughtWorks has a lot more capacity to be able to grow our own. We have partnered with some of the coding academies. I know we use Northern Coders, and I'm for the life of me remember the name of the ones we use in London, but we partner with companies, and we use scholarship models where we provide people scholarships, deserving people of scholarships to go to these academies, and then they go through our recruitment process off the back of it. It's not a shoe-in, but we trust the learnings that they have in those environments. So you can partner with other organizations and pull through to your own recruiting for that. So I just want to make that clear for people who may not have the capacity in-house to do your own training. And those career changers, is what we call them, have proven to be really successful, because to Rick and Mohammed's point, you're hiring for the brain, or you're hiring for that mindset, you're hiring the attitude and the aptitude, not necessarily the skill set. So it's just that's something to think about. And then the last thing would just be, on the in getting people to stay piece. Some of it's around, I mean, hopefully all of us have companies that are continuing to grow, and any part of company growth is new opportunities for people to step up. So I think it's you can't just invest in someone once and forget about them. You have to have a continued path and a journey for that individual. And that's down to, how do you support individuals in their career growth, and what's your company culture? And, you will still have a drop off, but I think we've been really successful at ThoughtWorks over the years to have a lower than industry average drop off because of our culture. So I think it's important to think about those aspects.
Yeah, no, I think the cultures are really important. But Matt, does that play into any of your experience?
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, that's exactly what I was just going to start just talking about a little bit. I think, being much like a medium-sized organization, certainly in the tech world, it's quite small, and it's okay to accept, people are going to come on board, and perhaps they're not going to stay with you forever. That's okay, but again, Renee's kind of already said it now. What your job families look like today, and what they're going to look like in 1, 2, 3, 4 years' time. Well, if the last year should have taught us anything, it's that that's not going to be the case. Career paths are going to develop and change over the next couple of years. People who come into one role may find they've got a skill in a different area. You give them exposure in your organization to what they're interested in. If they're working on what they're interested in, they're going to grow and develop and potentially feel, build that loyalty with you, build that employee experience. So they're going to hang around. And if they are going to move on again in years to come, then, build your pipeline in such a way that, you're reaching out now, plan looking into schools. Having spent a long time working in the civil service, I'm not going to start. I haven't learned to critique the government yet, so I'm not going to start. But we can't massively influence the government spending money on schools, but we can, as organisations and leaders in those organisations, look to reach out into universities and schools and A-level students, things like that, to talk about careers in tech. Tech isn't just someone sitting there at a keyboard doing this anymore. Tech is creative problem solving. That's what it is. It's just those creative problems keep changing. And to Rick's earlier point, I would agree that, it's not a catastrophe, it's just the pace has changed. And so the pace has changed. It looks like there's a big gap, but the market's going to evolve and tweak, and the gap will start being filled again. But that pace isn't going to stop. We solve a problem today, it'll just become a different problem tomorrow. So we need to look as leaders of our organizations of how we're going to set ourselves up so we don't keep falling into little chasms of where there's a gap. There's a gap in an area, we haven't identified it. That's probably on us more than on technology. The culture piece really, really, really matters. Organizations really should focus on it. And one more stat to finish off. A PwC report recently, it was kind of like 3% of female A-level students said their career in tech was their first choice, but there's like 64% of females study a STEM subject at school. What happens there? You know, what is happening? Why is the tech world perceived in such a way? There are things we can do to address that. And I guess, you know, the stuff that WeShape is doing, you know, your blogs and the stuff you talked about at the beginning, that's good stuff. Talk about what tech really means. Don't let people feel like they're bottled. They're kind of going to be pigeonholed. You're going to come and work in this sector. That'll be your job for life. It won't be. You know, things are going to change.
Yeah, no, I like that. Rick, on the cultural point, you know, you're bringing together some companies, right? Which brings lots of challenges. Are you finding that you've got lots of different cultures that you're having to bring together, and is that impacting people's desire to stay or go?
Oh, so I mean, one, I think we're in that weird period at the moment, right, where all attrition dropped off as people stayed safe. Right, you know, why would you change jobs in the middle of a pandemic? So I think, you know, we're in a period where we'll see it start to spike back up again. Movement overall, I agree with everything I've heard. So we'll answer your question in a second, David. Movement overall, I think is a really positive thing. I think it stops people getting stale. I don't think jobs for life exist anymore. And I think there's actually more movement from large companies to small companies than people realize, because people are so confident that they can find another role if where they've moved to doesn't work out. So that safety of enterprise isn't a thing anymore. Culturally, though, yes, I am in a weird place. I'm trying to create an identity for a division. There's 2,000 people who work in technology in my division. How do you give them, what are the things that matter to them from a cultural perspective? Because people don't leave just for money. People leave for opportunity, they leave for learning, they leave for challenge, they stay for culture. So I'm not interested in creating a single culture for the whole organization. I think that's a bad idea. I think you need to have some values that underpin what your culture is, and then you need local accents, if you like, regional accents on what happens in each of your areas. So I have teams now out in Cluj, in Dublin, in Portugal, in Leeds, in Sheffield, and London. And it would be crazy to say that they all have to have the same culture, but they should all be based on the same values that make people want to join in the first place. And you should be able to understand what those values are when you work there, because that's what you'll stay for. You won't stay because, well, you might stay for a bonus, but really when you start to look at the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivators, the things that people really stay for matter much more about the people they work with, the work they do, and the environment they work in.
I mean, some really good stuff there. My big takeaway there is we're not facing into a catastrophe, right? You know, it's different. Some of it is familiar to us as senior leaders. Hopefully that will give some of our attendees here today, you know, a little bit of hope that, you know, keep going, keep looking at all of the different things that attract talent, make talent stay. Keep investing in them. I love the grow your own. I think that's something that we can do. But let's move on, because Sarah's asked us a question which leads us nicely from this subject into our next question, right? She said, how would you cope if the requirement is needed sooner than it takes to grow your own? Delivery deadlines, new products. And I think, you know, the next question is surrounded on this. It's saying, you know, during the pandemic, a lot of people have gone, oh, we need to shift more to online. We need to go digital first service. We need to do all of those things, which we've maybe talked about a bit, but now the pandemic is forcing us to get going on that a bit quicker. And so often we've gone and sought external expertise. You know, that could be in the guise of a ThoughtWorks, for example, or it could be a smaller digital agency that we've worked with, or it could be contractors that we brought into the building, people who we haven't grown. Given that point, you know, that's the reality of life. We need to bring it in. As things maybe start to settle down, people return to the office, maybe, I'm not sure the throughput will ever settle down again, but, you know, is that something where we're going to suddenly find, oh, we've now got a different set of people, a different set of dynamics. Maybe they're not bought into our culture, they're bought into their culture. And just like, how is that going to impact the new way of working with a combination of people that you've had in your organization for a long time, people that you've grown, people that you've brought in for third parties who came in to get things going fast in the pandemic? I think everybody's probably got some thoughts on this. Mohammed, should we go with you first?
Yeah, no problem. I think one of the things that I certainly learned, like we all went into the pandemic saying, okay, we need to adapt to remote working. And then you can do it two ways. You can say, you can take the hit and just quick, let's readapt without thinking ahead. But I think certainly in my case, it was really a more long-term, this is a new world kind of thinking. And that thinking is really about how does this new world influence the way we hire, the way we manage, the type of people we want. Whilst in the past, we probably would have focused, as we said, in terms of hiring, in terms of the actual skill set based on a certain environment. Now the working environment and the dynamics around the flexibility we worked fit directly into the shape of the team and who we hire. So certainly dependability has been increasing in terms of the way we measure performance, being resourceful, the quality of communication. So, and that should be the case regardless of where we work. If we went back into a full office setting, those qualities are still good to have, actually. If we went to a hybrid mode, so we try to find a way to shape the teams that is kind of irrespective of the way we work moving forward. So in that respect, the question of going back to normal is not really a question anymore. We're just now in a mode where we just have a culture, ways of working, collaboration tools, collaboration techniques, the way we do product management. So the ramification is quite big, actually. It's not just a process thing or culture thing. It's kind of rethinking how we do work, looking at all the facets of pushing change, pushing technology. So for me, it's really a holistic approach that we need to kind of look at and kind of park the COVID, not COVID, post-pandemic. It's kind of, I think it's a good learning. It's really, we were kind of our heads in the sand in a comfortable kind of, stereotypical, way. Every company kind of looked different, looked the same in terms of how they work. Now you can start to see, companies like adapting so that they're not impacted by the location or the physicality of the work environment.
I think you're right, Mohammed, that the companies are getting used to it. And us as senior leaders are probably seeing, this is obvious, mix and match a little bit, get whatever we need. Yeah. I guess, are the employees on the ground who have maybe been with us for a few years, are they feeling comfortable about that? Matt, you've entered a new organization recently. You've got a lot of people, you'll have come in with a lot of new, fresh ideas. So you're almost one of these outsiders coming in, right? How has that impacted? How have you managed to say, this is okay, it's all right that we've got lots of external expertise and help, and maybe just somebody comes in to kickstart us on something or helps us get, and then how have you assured your permanent people that they have a role to play in a long-term future of the company?
Good question. Yeah, much like Rick, I did that crazy thing of changing jobs in the middle of a pandemic, just for the challenge. It's a good question. I mean, for me, the most important thing to remember is that when this all kicked off, kind of 15 odd months ago now, it was a crisis and everyone had to react instantly to it. You don't have to react instantly to going back. You've got time. The one thing you have is time, especially with the constant changing of regulations. You've got a bit of time to think about what these returns mean. And for me, it shouldn't be a surprise to you what your staff think. You should be talking to your staff. You should have been talking to your people all the way through, because your people, that's the most important part of everything we're trying to do. So if you don't know what your people think already, then you're probably in a bit of a sticky situation, because you should already be aware. But if you're not, so that the key bit is talking to them, getting that feedback, seek the feedback. What is it that's worked well for you during this kind of year or so? What hasn't worked so well? What has been, direct, when you have your one-to-ones with your direct reports things, what has worked well when we brought in support? How has that worked for you? How has it helped you develop? And focus the attention on the positive part, because by and large, it will have been positive. To Sarah's question there, and we've worked with partners, I would like to work with more, rapid scale of the team, scale it back, scale it up, scale it back. Well, you've done that. Find out how people reacted to it, what did they learn, and then take the good bit. It sounds straightforward, I'm sure. Don't take the good bit, dump the bad bit. And as you go back, keep getting that feedback. So as you kind of evolve and tweak your processes, seek the feedback on it, because we don't have to react now at that pace we reacted before. We can take a breath. we can act, I guess as leaders, again, we need to act with that kind of compassion and inclusion. Going back to Rick's point again, teams are so different. They're going to, especially if you've got a widely divided team. My team's UK spread, not worldwide spread, but it's our job to adapt our styles to suit our people, not the other way around. So we need to find out what each individual group of individuals is feeling about a situation and understand that how team A has responded to it won't be the same as team B, and that's okay. But our job in leading that is to work out how do we find the balance where we are going to move the business forward, perhaps without spending all that money on the outsourced expertise, and bring it in-house in a sensible fashion, which I guess comes back to that first question around the growing your own. How do we develop our training plans, our development plans based on what the gaps were? Massive gap in cyber probably in most places. So does that mean we need to think about that a bit more and tweak it in a different way going forward?
I think what Mohammed said a moment ago about COVID, non-COVID, I think a lot of your answer, highlights that, Matt. I know a couple of our questions are still about the pandemic, and that's something that's on everybody's mind, but it does feel like we're like, yeah, that was kind of last year. Now this is just, and a lot of what you just said, I think is universal and has been part of technology and other types of leadership for years. I don't think there's anything particularly magic you said in there, understanding what your people are, preparing them, giving them confidence that partnering, and I think partnering is a really strong word there, is the natural way to do things. When you need some expertise, bring it in, partner. If you can get to a position where they leave that knowledge in your company, that's really great. I mean, Rennie, this is something that, is the lifeblood of your business, is going in and partnering with other companies. Yeah. So, how do you, from that side, how do you make those companies and the employees that your employees have got to work with in those companies feel comfortable that you guys are coming in with some special, ingredients, mixing it up a little bit, and then leaving later on? How do you feel about that? And has the pandemic heightened that problem at all?
Yeah, I think we approach everything from the kind of Agile Manifesto point of view, which is, there are better ways of doing things, in our opinion, than the old ways of doing it, and these are the reasons why. And the reasons why, if anybody's read Daniel Pink Drive, it's all about what motivates people in their day-to-day jobs, and it's that mastery and autonomy, and that ability to kind of carve their path and contribute to something bigger. So I think a lot of what we do is really go in and help to take a small function sitting over here and that's kind of churning out some code and tie it into business objectives and tie it into outcomes that the business is trying to achieve. If you have a direct line of sight of what you're doing has an impact on society, if you're working in public sector or customers on the bottom end of the tail end of the output, you will be more motivated to do your job rather than thinking about your coding as a coding, day every day. So I think a lot of what we go in and do as a consultancy is, yes, we provide this, the technical excellence that comes along with it, but we're going in and helping create that mindset shift within our customers to help them think about doing things differently, to help them approach things from the view of their customers, to help think more about products rather than about project outcomes. It's all about those very slight transitions, but all that are really important to be driving the business outcomes you need, not just technology outcomes. And you have to have technology outcomes aligned with business outcomes. So we do a lot of that to bring people on board. And actually we see a lot of people engaged a lot more because they're working towards something they understand and believe in. And then the way that we do iterative development, which, everybody does nowadays, just gives, constant feedback and you allow for continuous improvement. And you pivot when you need to. You say, oh gosh, this ain't working, we've got to change direction, and you do that based on the feedback or the data that you have. So it's really kind of bringing all of that, bringing data insights into the picture, bringing the human element into the picture, but keeping the technology excellence at core.
I think
something into it, just very briefly, David. What I've realized is everything you said, Renee, is spot on, but having that established physical organization, because COVID did create a shakeup of even all those things. There's kind of sleepwalking into a routine. It's like having a town hall of everybody face to face. You get away with a less precise message. You get away with a bit of waffling around the strategy. You get away. So you've done your job. You say, yeah, I'm doing this. I'm explaining the vision. I'm making sure people are aligned around outcomes. But something around what COVID helped with, because everybody being remote, is forcing us to actually implement that in a really precise way, because you can't afford. You kind of have to double check, when everybody's remote, that are you aligned? Are you really motivated? There's all those physical signals you don't have anymore. So it's just, for me, it's kind of a wake-up call, almost like all the things we said we need to do. It's almost probably we weren't doing them exactly as they should. The way we onboard, the way we apply agility, because of that routine kind of autopilot mode that we were. And for me, it was really waking up from this and say, okay, how can we really do this? How can we be more precise in the alignment, in explaining the vision, making sure people are motivated? Certainly, I've seen that we had to work extremely hard to make sure that was the case, because there was a risk of people drifting, because they won't tell you I'm not motivated. They'll show up, sign up, do some work. But how do you really assess they're really behind you?
I think that's true, Mohammed. And Michael has asked us a question saying, COVID has caused us to shake things up, as you were saying. What else are we doing to take the opportunity? So it's easy to look at the negative side of that and just sort of go, how do we get back to normal? But actually, there's opportunity in there for us not to get back to normal and to actually go, oh, okay, this maybe gave us a kick that we needed. Rick, anything in your organization that you sort of saw as a result of that kind of shake up during COVID?
Well, we're definitely not going to go back to the way things were. I think that would be, this was not meant to be a 15-month business continuity exercise, right? This is a change. Yes, we've seen, so when the pandemic started, I was working in Skybet. We had 1,300 people in 3 locations. We moved to 1,300 people in 1,300 locations very quickly. And I now have a workforce of people who are, I have the Skybet people who were kind of addicted to co-location. We believed agile software delivery could only really be done truly if you were co-located and if you built those cultures that Renee just talked about from Dan Pink's book around autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And we learned quite quickly that actually you can do agile software delivery at scale remotely, entirely remotely. We now have some people who are desperate to go back to the office and desperate for some human interaction, if you like. We have other people who would happily never leave their home office again. And we have some people who are looking for a bit of a mix. And I think what we've seen in the success rate, and I was lucky because we're a digital business, so we don't have a large physical footprint to deal with. We don't have retail out, or I do now, but didn't. How can I create parity for all of my staff in a hybrid way of working? Because right now, when everybody is at home and everybody is on Zoom and you're dealing with it's the same playing field. You've got to deal with the same problems for everybody. How do you avoid Zoom exhaustion? How do we really teach managers to say, no, really, are you really okay? And check in properly when you lose those physical signs that you have when you're seeing all of a person. But when we go back to hybrid working, how do we make sure that we don't accidentally create second-class citizens? How do we avoid the situation where there's 5 people in a room having a conversation and there's one person desperately trying to listen in on a mobile phone in the middle of the table again? Those are the situations I think we've got to really focus in on.
Okay, all right. Anyone else want to chip in on this one, or should we move on? Cool. Okay. I think that leads us nicely into the next conversation, which touches on what you were just saying, Rick, about having 1,300 people in 1,300 offices suddenly. That is what we've all had to face suddenly. But it's not just about the individuals and the people and coming together in their teams, but some of our businesses have relied on physical offices or retail locations. Matt, you've clearly got a big physical footprint in your business, the different areas that you service. How's that going to change as we go back? Because we are going to have to go out there. We can't just all sit at home in our offices forever. There are going to be things that we're going to have to do. How's that going to change, and how are we going to do that balance?
It's from a ground control's point of view, it's quite interesting because obviously the majority of our business is done outdoors. So the pandemic oddly didn't cause huge amounts of impact. The grass has no awareness there's a global virus spreading everywhere. It keeps growing. So our operating model is really well suited to working in this way. But there's still a head office, and I think in our office, kind of 450 people kind of worked in the office pre-last March, and now obviously 1 or 2 people go in every now and then, and the kind of, you know, we're doing a lot of work now to kind of change the way the office is structured, and it's going to, for me, it's going to be, and it touches a bit on what Rick was saying on the last point, is it's how we're going to adapt to suit what the individuals want to be able to do, whilst also kind of suiting the need of the business. There is some need to have some face-to-face meetings. You know, some of our customers want to meet us face-to-face. Some of our work is better done in a face-to-face meeting, and other parts of it work perfectly well remotely. And it's also kind of remembering that everyone's in those 1,300 office locations, they're really, really different. Some people are great and they've got space and they can spread out, and it's cool. Some people are flat sharing, house sharing, and they've got nowhere, and so is everyone else in their house working at home, and so it doesn't work for them at all. So you've got to make sure, you know, as we go forward into the kind of the new normal, that, you know, we have that office capacity, but also we're managing it sensibly. So, you know, you're thinking about things like, when you're asking people to come in, what can you do about working hours? You know, maybe in the old days it was 8 till 6 or 9 till 4, whatever it was. Maybe now you can be much more flexible, and it's not about hours in the office, it's about outcomes when you come into the office. Think about when do you need to be there? What are you coming in for? Come in, do what you need to do, go away again. That's okay. And it all, to me, it all comes back to trust. You know, we have, and it's easy to forget, but we all trusted all of our people to go away and do this in an absolutely crazy time when a huge number of, you know, mental and physical health issues have been taking place as well, and people got on and got stuff done. I see very few stories of tech-driven businesses failing during the pandemic because their people let them down. I just don't see that happen. So if we trusted our people then, let's trust them now, and let's trust them to kind of define how we want to work differently going forward. You know, ask them what they want and see how we can deliver it for them in a way that kind of lets our business take all the good things over the last year, and then build on them with some of the, you know, obviously the good stuff that happened historically. It was, you know, good things happened in the past too.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. And, you know, having done all of these panel sessions over the pandemic, we've seen a lot of mindset from our teams, but also from leadership in terms of going, we've got this challenge now because of the pandemic, we've got this challenge. But a lot of what you guys are saying is very much like the pandemic has shown us a different way of operating, and now that we've seen that, we don't want to pull back from it. You know, my team runs globally. We support 3 country businesses, and you know, your point about come in the morning, go home in the afternoon or whatever, that's been very useful to my team, because they've come in early in the morning, or they've maybe done an early call to Service Australia from home, possibly in their pajamas, right? And then they've gone into the office for a quick meet up with some of the UK guys, and then left at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to get home in time to do a 6 or 7 p.m. call with America, you know, and that's worked very flexibly. And people are like, but then I found that people have asked permission to walk their dogs at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you know, and you really have to just give people license to be empowered to make those decisions. And generally speaking, I think everybody's really starting to get it now, you know, and so that's good.
And it goes back to the digital skills gap piece again at the start, doesn't it? And all the points about who can we recruit and who can we bring on board. Large sections of the kind of the working age population would be closed off in traditional patterns. People with young children, single parents, people with disabilities. There's so many people that perhaps would be closed off from traditional office work that it's there for. And again, if we're going to reach out and bring people in to keep things moving forward and growing our people, it's just a no-brainer to me. This is the way to do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mohammed, just coming away from the people part of it for a minute, I know that, you know, you had a lot of paper in your industry, right? And you sort of moved away from some of that. So I suppose you've taken a more digital first approach because you had to, and now you're seeing the benefits of that. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's back to my point about nobody was expecting what the pandemic would bring. So there was kind of a status quo in some parts of how we operate that nobody would ever have questioned in the way we operate a business. And the paper side of things is just kind of a tip of the iceberg of the things that you don't necessarily see. Like you talk about change people, but actually how people work. We know people are quite inventive of creating processes and in various ways to collaborate. And in our case, what we found out is we're actually very reliant in this industry on paper. And we had to kind of adapt and find ways to move away from it, which forced us to kind of be actually bold. So these were really open questions, but there was no incentive at that point to kind of tackle them properly. But with the change of the change of how work is done today, it's kind of in the forefront now. It's like we're looking for efficiencies We're looking at how we can make, really truly be agile, and those aspects where we still use paper to serve customers, or even internal to department. I guess there are a lot of companies that still use kind of bits of paper. So in our case, we really had to stamp out paper and find ways to change the product, change the way we communicate with our customers, and push them to the digital kind of digital first approach. So initially, that supply, I call it a supply chain of paper, because there's Royal Mail. Remember, like, it's not just us. It's like when the pandemic hit, Royal Mail was disrupted. Warehouses or post sorting offices were disrupted. When your business relies on paper, you see the impact very quickly, and you kind of discover, okay, we didn't know we were exposed to that. We were thinking about people being, furloughed, or problems with people working from home. It's not about that. It's actually companies who are rely on physical distribution. So for us, it's really about how can you adapt to that, and how can you make the system leaner. And at the end of the day, by being bold, we actually create better solution for consumer. We just been lazy a little bit because there was no significant event that prompted us to change those things.
Yeah, I mean, that's true for our whole industry, right? Is that every now and again we should just take a step back and say, what if we could do something from a different approach? And it is a shame that it caused a pandemic to make us think like that. I mean, Rick and Renee, your businesses, as I think you've already said, were pretty set up for remote working, digital first working, all of that kind of stuff. Was there anything that surprised you and made you think, okay, well, this is something which we always took for granted was a physical need, a physical requirement, whether that be people, paper, whatever. But then now that you've seen a different approach to it, you're like, yeah, okay, I want to stick with that. And anything particularly grab you there?
Yeah, I mean, I do think our culture is suffering a little bit from the lack of interaction and the lack of ability to collaborate. I mean, there are amazing tools out there right now that allow you to collaborate virtually, but it isn't the same as just being in a room with someone and standing at a whiteboard and creating or sticking a bunch of Post-its on a wall. And I think we're all feeling that. So for some degree, I think that we have lost our creative edge and our ability to innovate by not having any time in person. And that's why I do believe that some of our future is hybrid, as Rick mentioned, the hybrid model. We do see hybrid. We've done some employee surveys about how they intend to use the offices in the future. No one wants to use the office for individual working. Everybody wants to use their office for collaborative working. So we know what the direction of travel is going to be. We're actually repurposing our offices at the moment and going through and actually taking down desks and creating collaboration spaces while we're still in lockdown before we reopen, because we know that's how people are going to want to use the offices in the future. So I think it's just being a step ahead of what you're aware of from that point. Vic?
I think a lot of people are doing that. I think a lot of people are transforming their offices and taking that opportunity, and collaboration is the key word that's coming through on that.
Mm-hmm. I think I agree largely with what Renee's just said. I did another one of these talks about a month ago, and I used the phrase, I think we need to recharge our cultural battery. And we've burnt a huge amount of people's goodwill in working from home and getting them set up. And I think, I echo everything Matt said about, you've got to trust that people are going to do the right thing, because they've just shown how willing they are to do that through a really extraordinary period. But somewhere along the way, you do miss those human interactions. Not for me, it's not the meetings and the Post-its, it's the standing by the coffee machine, or the people you run into in the pub after work, or the conversations that are much less formal because you didn't all need to sit down in front of a screen and arrange a time to talk to each other. And it's those little bits that I think, I don't know how you reintroduce humanity. That's what I'm looking for us to find the way to do next.
Yeah, one of the things, and I know this is it's crude and it's hard to plan things, but I started just doing what's called office hours, like going back to old school university style. And Google Cal is quite cool. You can put appointment slots in, and so people can just drop in for 15 minutes and have a chat. And sometimes I even just book it with people and say, I haven't talked to you in a year. How are you doing? I mean, there's a lot of people in our business, so you can't touch everyone, but if many of your key leaders are making that effort. It is forced, don't get me wrong, but in some ways it's better than nothing. It's just really hard.
I do a similar coffee drop-in. I'll say I'm going to be on this Hangout or Zoom for the next hour. Anybody wants to come and chat, and usually chat rubbish, you know, doesn't have to be work, just chat about anything. If not, I sit there and do emails. But people always turn up, and we always start with football, and then I steer it away from that, and we get onto something more interesting. But you know, it's always a good time. I do find though that it's often the same people who take that time, and you know, you can't subscribe fun or water cooler moments, right? It's very difficult to do that. I found myself, I had an all hands with my department yesterday, and I found myself in that position where I was sort of saying, look, we haven't really spent the social budget very hard, guys. Come on, let's get out there. You know, I took my leadership team on a boat trip on the Broads, the Norfolk Broads last week, and we might have sampled some of our products. I couldn't possibly comment on that, but you know, we just went and had an afternoon just messing about, sort of thing. And you know, I went to my tech all hands yesterday and said, right, we did this. Now you go and do this. Come on, get it. You know, it's almost like you are sort of saying, look, it is important that you spend a bit of time not doing work together. So I think it's kind of challenging for that. We got
one quick thing on that. I think what you've got to be mindful of when you say it's the same people turning up every time is you've got to kind of think about what is on offer, and is it, again, unconsciously excluding people from it, because you know, we've been doing Taskmaster every Friday. We do a Taskmaster at the morning stand-up, so we have a slightly longer one on a Friday. But what I learned from doing that was that when you're doing things, you suddenly realise that certain people they're really put off by, they're not uncomfortable, they're culturally uncomfortable with it. So some of the tasks might put them off, especially in anything, you know, if it's touching on the ability for language and things like that. You've got a variety of people, so we kind of keep it really simple. So we've had like best hat, things like, you know, make a friend out of food was the one this morning. So that, I mean, it's literally anybody can do it. It's deliberately, you know, it's not about football sake, because people don't like football and won't come along and join in, because I'm not interested in football, not coming into that. So it's trying to find things that are culturally inclusive, even when perhaps you don't realise that you're excluding people.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. I mean, we've done all of the music quizzes and all of that kind of stuff, and the same people turn up. The one that was the most popular that we found was one of my people went out and just found a donkey visit, and we ended up doing a Zoom call with a donkey sanctuary. It was just the best. And everybody turned up, and it's the most watched video from all of our fun sessions. So if you want to know where to get hold of a donkey, these are real donkeys in a virtual setting. That's what I'm saying, right? So anyway, listen, that's interesting conversation. We're going to come to our last question, but I'm just going back through a couple of questions that we've got from our audience. So I think these all fall into the same bucket. Colin is saying, since we all work from home, is there a risk or opportunity of hiring directly from different countries? I mean, I can only look at that as an opportunity, but then I guess there's the whole, you know, we just talked about people getting together for fun or for collaboration. And, you know, Rick, you said the one person may be on a bad connection in a different country on the end of a phone. So I guess there's a kind of, yes, there's an opportunity, but you got to make sure you're set up to do it right. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I just say something on that very quickly? For me, I would summarize this challenge as just maintaining the bond. And various people need various injections of stuff to maintain a bond. So there are people who would meet the team once in a year and actually create such a strong connection on that one meeting that actually they will be able to be efficient and relate to it to their colleagues and be dependable. And other people need more frequent injection of social interaction. So for me, it's really about understanding who that other person is. I've had experiences in diverse and in distributed teams where we had people working abroad where we would see only once a year, others more closely, closer, and it worked quite well. But it's really down to understanding what that person's needs are. For me,
yeah, I agree. And then one of the other questions again about people and hiring was, how much do people gaining certificates contribute to closing the skill gaps, and how relevant is this? So we've talked about growing your own. It's still important that as we grow them, that we put them through industry standard training and certification. Is that something that's important? Rick, you got any thoughts on that?
I wonder, I might be largely controversial here and say I really don't pay very much attention to certification at all. I think that I'm glad that there's an industry around it, and if some people find it useful, then great. But no, like, you know, I'll go back to what I said at the start: hire for mindset, not skill set. Bring the right people who will fit the culture of your organization and help them to learn the skills that they need. I'm not a big fan of people showing me a certificate to tell me that they must be good at a job.
I totally agree with that. I mean, they're good. They tell you can do one specific thing to the level of the standard the person accrediting you said you could do it. You know, my best example of why I completely agree with Rick on that. Why, you know, I'm a Microsoft certified professional in VB6. They've never expired it because it's never been replaced. But that's, you know, 20 years ago when I was writing code. But I can still say it. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, that's true. It means something to somebody, Matt. I mean, you know.
One day, it did 20 years ago. Nowadays, I kind of think, oh, this is, you know, it doesn't, it's not the same anymore.
I bet you've still got the certificate on the wall, though, right?
Well, obviously, you know, I've got to make out wherever I can to look good. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, listen, we're on the home straight. We're going to move into our final question. It's usually one that allows everybody just to give a little bit of insight into what they're focused on. So we've talked about how we've handled the last year and what a year that was. What are the technology leaders' priorities, or what should technology leaders' priorities be for this year? What are the key things that we should focus on? Matt, do you want to pick that up to start?
Cybersecurity for me. I mean, obviously, I mean, I'm sure, you know, it's an obvious thing. You know, as over the last year, I mean, ransomware attacks are up 500%. The cost of ransomware attacks are up 40-odd%. The remote working, the hybrid working has taken people out of that nice little fortress of your internal network, where all your good firewalls and security and processes in place to keep things safe, and into their own home, where, you know, pretty much anything can happen. They're going to click on things. Their awareness drops because they're sitting at home. They perhaps don't give maybe, you know, when you get a home email, you don't pay the same scrutiny as you would if you're on your work machine. You know, investing in cyber policies, security, and BCDR. That would be my one.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I was reading my CISO sends me a regular scare report about stuff just to make sure it's at the front of my mind. It was sending me one on ransomware today, and I was reading it earlier saying, I think I've switched. I think I'm like, right, not how do we avoid this, but I'm assuming it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah. So what you do? How do you set yourself up in a way that the impact is minimized and you can recover?
How are we going to react when it inevitably happen?
Yeah.
Right?
How will you recover? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, that's good. Renee, what about you?
Yeah, I was piggybacking on that. I was torn between two. I think there's some statistics around the growth around digital product and services increased 83% in 2020, and it's expected to grow even more in 2021. So therefore, you're looking at digital business acceleration, which then puts the scare on cybersecurity. So that was definitely one of mine. I think the other is it would be irresponsible, I think, of tech leaders to not embrace this change of the era of employee choices here. And we absolutely, we've all been talking about the need to adapt, but it is quite interesting, and I'll give a really quite quick relevant example. So we sponsor a lot of visas in our business, and part of induction, bringing new people on, even in a remote world, is you have to verify their identity and their passports. And HMRC has accommodated and been wonderful and allowed us to, I'm not sorry, HMRC, the Home Office have allowed us to check identities virtually, and all of a sudden they want us to go back to doing it physically. And it's just a bit like, well, why would we go back? Like, why do we need to go back? If we have a process in place that works, why on earth would we go back to the way it was? For what reason? So it's just those things that I don't think businesses realize. It's just like, oh, well, the pandemic's over, so we can go back to the way of working. No, we absolutely must think about how do we evolve, and how do we grow from where we are, and how do we nurture what's great, and how do we fix what's not working in a remote world, and make that hybrid working model really work for us. So that's
I
my.
think that's one of the key takeaways from this session is don't just slip back, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Rick, what about you?
Well, actually, both of mine have just been stolen. So I also had cybersecurity. I also have an InfoSec director, and I ask him regularly, what keeps you awake at night? What should we be afraid of? I agree. All the stats on ransomware and all of the changes we've made to accommodate working from home have naturally eroded some of our own protection, and the landscape is getting ever more threatening. So I'm focused on that. And I agree with what you said, David. I think it's not a matter of if, but when. So how do you mitigate the impact? How do you lower your blast radius? And then the other one is in line with what Renee was just saying. I really think, how do we make the working experience as frictionless as possible for staff? What's the new future way of working? How do we, and that might include to the point that that somebody in the audience asked about, where do you recruit from? What's the opportunity? Well, okay, we need to explore that. We need to work through what that is. I don't think it's as easy as saying we'll hire from anywhere, because you do need to consider what's the impact on the individual, what's the impact on the culture, how will it work, how do you make sure that it's a good experience. So those two for me are there. And since they've both been nicked, I'll add a third one, which is what innovations have come out of this last 15 months that we can all benefit from. What else is there? You saw the rapid rise of little companies like Zoom. For a while, you couldn't get a hold of a webcam, but what's new? I'm really new, not just a sort of acceleration of something else. I'd like to find that out.
Excellent. That's that. Embrace the new. That sounds good. And Mohammed.
Yeah, I mean, we relate with a lot of, obviously, the data security element. For me, it's really taking all this new world and applying it to the way we deliver customer experiences, specifically in a lot of fields. And you mentioned, Renee, like the way some of the administrative kind of tasks with home office, HMRC still rely on paper is kind of incompatible anymore with this world. We see the same pattern with, businesses or industries like pensions industry, or the financial advice industry, where there are people who more and more work from home, so they can't pop in like in the high street while they are out and about. They actually work. Their schedule is completely different. So how do we adapt to that? How do we also offer voice or video ways of consuming this? Are some of the digital products that are more aligned with this new world. So for me, some of the priorities really have to look at customer experiences and the technology we deliver in terms of services to see how we can adapt them.
That's great. I think I'm with you guys, a lot of the echoing. We have to say security or we get sacked from our job. So, that's obviously there. I think that the people element, I don't know how you guys feel, but I've been doing technology for 30 plus years. I've definitely been promoted to my level of technical incompetence. So I feel that it's my job to really get the right people, whether they're permanent employees or partners, get them into a virtual room and get stuff out of their way so that they can do great work, whether that's around security, whether that's around building product, whether it's around moving from physical to digital. That's really what I concentrate on from a leadership perspective, and I'm just going to carry on doing that, getting out of people's way, and so that they can do their best work. That's what my leadership focus is. Let's really enjoyed our conversation. I'm going to hand back to Chris now, but thanks very much, panelists. Really enjoyable conversation, and sorry for those questions for our audience that we didn't manage to get to. Hopefully you got quite a lot of good experience and knowledge out of what we talked about today. Thanks, Chris.
Cheers, David. I just want to say thanks for everyone who joined the session. Hopefully you found it all insightful. I forgot to mention something at the start. So I just want to congratulate Renee, who is a finalist in the Women in Tech Excellence Award. Also, just on behalf of our audience, is Rick's dog, since we live in a life of luxury.
Yeah.
So they were asking what the name is of the dog.
The dog's called Harper.
Harper. Lovely. David, did you say you're going to be hanging around for some time for anyone who want to answer questions? Or
I can do, yeah, sure.
Oh, yeah, I guess if we leave it open for kind of 15 minutes, 10 minutes, if anyone wants to chuck in any questions or Q&A to the audience, from the audience. Yeah, thanks again for London Tech Leaders. really good session. If you want to speak at a future event, just drop us a note, or if you want to become part of a contributing author, articles, content, videos, just drop us a note directly. But yeah, thanks again. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Thanks, guys. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, everyone.